Psalm 49 in some ways reads like a journal of one who knows that evil days are coming. And so he is ready to depart this life, realizing that he might be the subject of those who come after him to take his life. And he is expounding his wisdom to his readers, his listeners, his watchers, his followers, imparting wisdom to them because that he knows that he will live forever, and he wants his listeners, his students, his people to experience the same kind of peace, the same kind of trust in God that he himself experiences. And so he turns to explain a proverb, he says, and he notes that he realizes that evil days are coming, but that there's no way that he needs to be fearful because he knows that those who stand against them will not live forever, that all people eventually perish, but that he himself will not perish because he is a servant of the living God and he knows that God will save him. And so the writer or the speaker of this psalm imparts his wisdom. He challenges people to remember that, like all animals, like all people, eventually they all are destined to die. And he proclaims this not in despair, but to direct them to place their faith in the one and only true God. He reminds them that all people will perish, but that those who believe in the one and only true God who has appointed his king to rule on his holy mountain will, like himself, be redeemed from the realm of the dead. So the writer, the speaker, the proclaimer of Psalm 49 challenges his people to remember this, to have the right understanding about life and death itself. And I give all of that about Psalm 49 as a background to Psalm 50 because I believe Psalm 50 picks up along the same line. It's easy sometimes to think that the Psalms are randomly put together and that the connections between them are not always so necessarily obvious, but Psalm 50 continues the theme that was picked up in Psalm 49 that all people will perish and are accountable before the one and only true God. And Psalm 50 delivers that same kind of truth, uh, proclaiming to the people that because they all will perish at one point or another, that God himself is the one who will judge them for their responses to himself. And so in the first half of Psalm 50, we see that the psalm pictures the Lord, the mighty one, God the Lord. He is the one who is the judge of the universe. He is the one who summons the heavens and the earth together uh, to proclaim his pronouncements of judgment and righteousness and justice before the entire universe. And so the first half of Psalm 50 uh, begins by saying that God first judges his own people. He brings them before himself in order to assess how they have responded to him. The word sacrifice in this psalm appears 4 times. You'll see it here in verse 5. You see it here in verse 8. You see it as a verb in verse 14. And then you'll also see it towards the end of the psalm in verse 23, where the speaker refers to thank offerings of sacrifice. And so, after telling the people that God begins judgment among his own people, he lets the people know that God is not interested so much in the ritual aspect of sacrifice, but that he is more interested in the fellowship that his people would seek with him through their sacrifice. So this writer is speaking his words of wisdom, picking up from Psalm 49, which shares his wisdom as if he is prepared to finish his mission. He realizes that evil is coming, that he has every reason to be afraid, but that he will not be afraid because, as expressed in Psalm 48, God will guide him, God will protect him, and that he knows that God will redeem him because he has been uh, committed, he has been faithful to the covenant God who has called him to represent his people. And so in this psalm, as it says that God will also express his judgment to wicked people who live double-minded lives, who proclaim his laws but yet do not live by them, that the speaker warns the people that God wants them to have fellowship with him. So, as you can see, the writer explains to the wicked people how God's judgment will be effected upon them. And you can see, hopefully, the importance of the concept of sacrifices as explained in this particular psalm. There were several sacrifices that God demanded of his people, and the fellowship offering among the sacrifices was the one in which people were allowed to participate in the meal. And particularly, there were three kinds of fellowship offerings, and the thank offering was particularly special in the sense that it could be offered for any reason. So, as we reflect upon this psalm, hopefully we can get some sense of the importance of the reference to the sacrifice, the sacrifices, the act of sacrifice. In this particular psalm, the writer is challenging the readers to realize that God wants true devotion, willful, willing submission, surrender to him, rather than religious ritual. We will see the importance of that as we move into Psalm 51.